Article 7 Training, Rule 37, Procedural Safeguards. Notice of Procedural Safeguards.
Topics covered in this video will be procedural safeguard requirements, when and how is a procedural safeguard obtained, and what information is contained within the Notice of Procedural Safeguards.
Procedural Safeguard Requirements. A public agency is required to establish, maintain, and implement procedures to ensure that students with disabilities and their parents are afforded procedural safeguards with respect to a free, appropriate public education by the agency. Procedural safeguards outline student and parent rights for the special education process. Procedural safeguards are built into Article 7.
When and how is a procedural safeguard obtained? A parent of a student with a disability receives a written notice of procedural safeguards once each school year. The procedural safeguard must be written in a format that is easy to read and in a language understandable to the general public. A parent may elect to receive the written notice of procedural safeguards by an electronic mail communication if the public agency makes that option available.
There are 5 other occasions when the public agency must provide a parent with the Notice of Procedural Safeguards. Written notice must be given upon the initial referral or parent request for evaluation. Written notice of procedural safeguards must be given to a parent upon receipt of the first filing of a complaint. Written notice of a procedural safeguard must be given upon due process hearing in a school year, should there be one. Written notice of a procedural safeguard must be given should the public agency decide to remove a student from the educational program that results in a disciplinary change of placement. And the parent may request and be given a copy of the written notice of procedural safeguards at any time.
What information is contained within the Notice of Procedural Safeguards? The written Notice of Procedural Safeguards must include a full explanation of 19 different topics. 1. The parent's right to receive written notice before the public agency proposes to initiate or change, or refuses to initiate or change, the identification, evaluation, educational placement of the student, or provision of a free, appropriate public education to the student.
2. The prerequisite of written parental consent for initial evaluation. A reevaluation, unless the parent fails to respond to a public agency's reasonable efforts to obtain consent. Initial special education services. A public agency's access to a student's public benefits or insurance programs or private insurance proceeds. The release of a student's educational records to officials of participating agencies providing or paying for transition services. The exchange of educational records regarding a parentally placed non-public school student between officials of the public agency where the non-public school is located and the school district of legal settlement. The public agency inviting a representative of any participating agency likely to be responsible for providing or paying for transition services. An excusal of a case conference committee from a case conference committee meeting, in whole or in part, when the meeting involves a modification to or discussion of the member's area of the curriculum or related services. 3. The parent's right to participate as a member of the case conference committee, to request a case conference committee meeting if he or she believes that a required component of the IEP should be changed to ensure the provision of a free, appropriate public education, to request a copy of the initial educational evaluation report at no cost prior to the case conference committee meeting, or a meeting with an individual who can explain the results of the educational evaluation prior to the case conference committee meeting, or both. To request a reevaluation. To obtain an independent educational evaluation, including the right to have the results of the independent educational evaluation considered by the case conference committee or the independent hearing officer in a due process hearing.
The circumstances and criteria under which an independent educational evaluation may be obtained at public expense.
4. The parent's rights with regard to the student's educational record, including the right to accessing the record, inspecting and reviewing the record, challenge information in the record, amend information in the record, consent for disclosure, use, destruction of records, and any fees associated with copying the record.
5. The transfer of rights to the student at 18 years of age unless a guardian or an educational representative has been appointed for the student.
6. The availability of mediation and the mediation process.
7. The right of the parent or any interested party to file a complaint.
8. The parent's right to request a due process hearing to challenge the public agency's proposed or refused action regarding a student with a disability.
9. The difference between a complaint and due process hearing request, including the jurisdiction of each procedure, what issues may be raised under each procedure, the allowable time period in which to file a complaint or due process hearing request, the opportunity for the public agency to resolve a complaint, a parent's request for a due process hearing, the filing procedures for complaints and due process, and the decisional timelines for complaints and due process hearings.
10. The student's placement during the pendency of any due process hearing.
11. Due process hearings, including requirements for disclosure of evaluation results and recommendations.
12. Administrative appeal regarding complaints and due process hearings.
13. Civil action, including the time period in which to file a civil action.
14. Attorney's fees.
15. The requirements for a parent's unilateral placement of a student with a disability in a non-public school at public expense.
16. The protections and procedures for students who are subject to disciplinary changes of placement, which includes manifestation determinations and placement in an interim alternative educational setting. 17.
The protections for students who have not been determined eligible for special education and related services.
18. Reporting of crimes allegedly committed by students to appropriate authorities.
19. The names and addresses of agencies and organizations, including the public agencies that provide assistance to parents in understanding special education rules and regulations.